So I'm not planning on watching Kraven the Hunter for another few months, but if that movie is as bad as I think it is, I'm saying it right now, if that movie's as bad as I think it is, I'm going to tear the pants off of my body when I make my review. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Today I'm going to be talking about the movie Kraven the Hunter from 2024, which was the last movie of the Sony Spider-Verse that they tried to do. It was a bad idea to make this movie. Similarly to some of the other movies in the Sony Spider-Verse, as a matter of fact, most of them were probably a bad idea. How this movie managed to get made in the first place is just beyond me, because we had two Venom movies, which are understandable. Venom is a character that people like and they wanted to see his movies, and the first Venom movie was actually pretty good, and if I'm not mistaken, performed pretty well at the box office. And Venom Let There Be Carnage was a lot more controversial. People are a lot more split on that movie, but after you follow both of those movies with Morbius, which was not a success and just panned by audiences and critics, and then Madam Web, which is bottom tier superhero movie, like bottom 3 of all time. At that point, Sony should have given up on the Spider-Verse thing that they were trying to do. I understand giving Venom a third movie just to round out that trilogy and to finish up that story. That makes perfect sense to me, even though the third Venom movie is my least favorite of the Venom trilogy. I understand completing that trilogy. How Kraven the Hunter managed to get made after all of that is just beyond me. You gotta love an exposition dump. The Sony Spider-Verse really seems to, especially one devoid of anything intriguing and with stale acting. Stale is being nice, by the way. Some of the acting in this movie just isn't good in my opinion, but that could be in part to not so great dialogue and direction. I did think that most of the acting in this movie though is pretty decent. It's pretty solid. Pretty good even, especially considering what this script is and what this movie is and what these actors had to work with. A portion of the action in this movie just looks wonky, it looks off, and it's not the only thing. There are a lot of CGI animals in this movie that don't look remotely real. To be frank, this was an awful design for the Rhino, and I think that's widely accepted amongst everyone who's seen this movie. But the silver lining, I guess, is at least the Rhino as a character and as a concept was explained a little bit in the story and was weaved in there a little bit with his origin and why he is the way he is. So at least they did that and not just this guy is a rhino. I know explaining why a rhinoceros man is kind of the bare minimum, but this is the Sony Spider-Verse we're talking about. I thought that Aaron Taylor Johnson did as good of a job as he possibly could have with what he had to work with, and I thought he looked really good as Kraven. I like his casting from a looks perspective, and I thought that his costuming was really good as well. What little we get visually of the chameleon at the end of the movie I really liked, but the problem is that it feels like it just came out of left field. The brother turning villain makes sense from what his story is throughout this movie, but it doesn't make sense to have him turn against Kraven, turn against his brother. That feels undeserved and unearned. I don't think that the overall story of this movie is bad necessarily, but it's just nothing new. It's kind of just the same old, same old. We've seen a story like this a million times, and there's just nothing unique about this movie that pulls you in and is like, oh, I want to watch that specifically. It's just there. This entire movie is just there. I may have mentioned this at some point in the past because I have done reviews for Morbius, for Madam Web, and for Venom The Last Dance, and so I may have mentioned this, I probably have, but once again, this movie just reminds me, yet again, that it makes no sense to make this sort of Sony Spider-Verse without Spider-Man and try to make all these villains into heroes for your Spider-Verse. And I would say that most people knew that long before this movie came out, but for some reason after Sony should have learned that lesson, they just kept going, and so eventually we're left with this. I wouldn't even say that Kraven the Hunter is the movie that killed the Sony Spider-Verse. It isn't. The universe was already decaying at this point. Continuing the Sony Spider-Verse and still releasing Kraven the Hunter after everything that came before is the equivalent of not only beating the dead horse, now you shoot the dead horse in the leg and expect something to happen. And just to put that into perspective a little bit better, Kraven the Hunter is the 6th and final movie in the Sony Spider-Verse. The first movie, Venom, made more money in its opening weekend than Kraven the Hunter did in its entire theatrical run. The universe was long since dead, and they just dragged it out. This has to be a money laundering scheme. I don't get this at all. When I was watching Madam Web a few years ago, that movie had some awful, atrocious ADR, and Kraven the Hunter has some noticeable ADR as well, but it's not as bad as in Madam Web. And if you don't know what that is, it's when you film a scene that has dialogue and characters are talking, and you realize that that dialogue doesn't work for the scene or whatever, and so you go in later, dub it over with new dialogue and try to match it up to what the mouth movements are in what you've already filmed. And sometimes it works, sometimes it really doesn't. The key is to not pull audiences out and make them think, oh, that was weird, what was that? Ideally, you don't even want people to notice whenever you have a scene that has ADR, but unfortunately, Kraven the Hunter does have one or two scenes that pulled me out for a second, but not nearly as bad as the ones in Madam Web. There was also a particular scene in this movie where the continuity was messed up, and it's not the most important thing in the world, but whenever a salad is going to be on screen and your actor is going to be eating said salad or pretending to eat said salad, you have to keep the continuity up if it's going to be in focus, because one of the notes I wrote down while watching this movie is just Saladgate. But yeah, that's really all I've got to say about Kraven the Hunter. It was not a good movie, but it wasn't the worst movie of the Sony Spider-Verse, which, granted, is not saying a lot, because Madam Web is, in my opinion, a bottom 3 superhero movie ever. But maybe that's just of the ones I've seen. Maybe there are other awful ones out there somewhere. I know there are some that aren't very good that I haven't seen. Maybe I'll get to those someday. But yeah, Kraven the Hunter, just kind of uninspired. The entire time I was watching, I was basically just like,
I'll get to the part where I start to give a shit.
But yeah, that's all I've got to say about Kraven the Hunter. I've now seen all the Sony Spider-Verse movies in this little universe of 6 movies, so I'm finally done with that, which is kind of a relief, kind of a weight off my shoulders. But yeah, if you saw Kraven the Hunter, what did you think of this movie? Did you see it in theaters? Did you watch it on streaming? Have you just not bothered to see it because of reviews or because of previous installments in the Sony Spider-Verse? Let me know in the comments down below. If you want to help me out here on YouTube, liking this video, commenting on this video, subscribing to the channel, or checking out some of my other videos, all help me grow the YouTube channel. Like I said, I did do a review for Morbius and for Madam Web and for Venom: The Last Dance. So if you want to watch any of my other reviews for the Sony Spider-Verse, I will maybe link them at the end of this. It depends if I remember to do that. But yeah, until next time, bye.
Kraven!